Myrtle Forest is part of the northern section of Wellington Park, one of the largest areas of reserved land outside of the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area. Despite the area being recognised for its natural beauty as early as 1880, it remains one of the lesser visited recreation areas in Wellington Park.
Gwendolyn Appledorf, who was a resident of the nearby township of Bismarck, which is now Collinsvale, wrote in her memoir that in 1880 the myrtle and sassafras trees were so thick and high that you could barely see the sky, and it was so quiet that when you walked along the track you almost spoke in whispers.
Today, Myrtle Forest offers visitors a different experience when compared to other areas of Wellington Park. It is one of the few rainforest patches on the Wellington Range, which is habitat to a diverse range of flora and fauna. The climate in Myrtle Forest, like much of Wellington Park, is cool temperate, with temperatures ranging between -5 degrees Celsius in winter to 30 degrees Celsius in summer. However, some of the climatic conditions in Myrtle Forest are different to other areas of the park. Due to its location on the north-facing slope of Canungy Mount Wellington, Myrtle Forest is relatively sheltered from the high-velocity winds that can be experienced further to the west and south. Snow falls around 6 times per year and settles on the ground around 2 to 3 times per year. Myrtle Forest surrounds a small permanent stream known as Myrtle Forest Creek, which flows from the foothills of Collins Cap through a steep gully which is roughly 1.15 square kilometres in size. The northern edge of Wellington Park, and hence Myrtle Forest, is bordered by a semi-rural environment which includes the communities of Fairy Glen and Collinsvale. Myrtle Forest can be accessed via a 20-minute drive from Hobart. Despite this close proximity, the area can still feel very remote. The vegetation in Myrtle Forest ranges from wet eucalypt forest, with a rainforest and broadleaf scrub understory in the lower parts of the gully, to vegetation dominated by broadleaf scrub in the drier upper slopes of the gully. In the rainforested gully, the canopy is dominated by Eucalyptus regnans and the understory by manferns, with a tall broadleaf shrub layer of blanket leaf, musk, silver wattle and dogwood. The other dominant rainforest species are sassafras and myrtle, from which the area takes its name. There are also a great variety of ferns, mosses, lichens and other fungi in this part of the gully. A feature of the upper slopes of the gully is the beautiful dragon heath. Myrtle Forest is one of the very few areas that survived the 1967 bushfires which devastated much of the vegetation in Wellington Park. This was most likely due to the dampness of the rainforest vegetation and the gully topography. Rainforest vegetation defends itself from fire through maintaining a damp state. However, the species are extremely fire sensitive and cannot regenerate after burning. This map shows the fire sensitivity of vegetation in Myrtle Forest and the surrounding area. With predicted overall warmer temperatures and more extreme temperature ranges as a result of climate change, rainforest becomes less resistant to fire and fires are expected to increase in frequency and intensity. While most species in Myrtle Forest would perish in the event of a fire, one rare species, curly sedge, Carex tasmanica, would possibly benefit from such a disturbance. Curly sedge is a small perennial clumping sedge grass endemic to Victoria and Tasmania. It likes to grow in seasonally damp conditions in grassland or woodland. In Myrtle Forest, a small patch of forest was cleared to create a day-use area with a toilet and picnic shelter, which provided ideal habitat for curly sedge to establish as a viable population. Very little is known about the species' dispersal, but it is thought that disturbance, such as fire, is needed for seed germination and establishment. It is likely that the curly sedge plant is also fire-resistant and will resprout after a fire. The species can also multiply via division of adult plants or spread via rhizomes. This accounts for the reasonable number of individuals in Myrtle Forest where there hasn't been a disturbance. The species was listed as vulnerable under the National Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act of 1999 and the Tasmanian Threatened Species Protection Act of 1995, and a recovery plan was proposed to protect it from extinction. Following this, numerous populations of curly sedge were discovered in Tasmania on private land, and the conservation status was removed. The curly sedge population in Myrtle Forest is the only population protected within a reserve, and for this reason is of high natural value. Tasmanian wet eucalypt forests and rainforests are habitat for a great variety of animals, some of them threatened. Myrtle Forest is most likely home to endangered species such as the grey goshawk, the wedge-tailed eagle, spotted-tailed quoll, as well as a great variety of snails, beetles, worms, and burrowing crayfish. The area could also be habitat for the swift parrot and the Tasmanian devil. Other significant species include the little pygmy possum, the eastern quoll, the scrub-tit, long-nosed potteroo, and the southern brown bandicoot. These species are not listed as endangered, but are threatened by the feral cat predation. Yellow-tailed black cockatoos nest in large tree hollows in the area. An impressive bird of prey, the grey goshawk, Accipiter novae-hollandii, depends on wet forests for its habitat. Grey goshawk prefer to nest in blackwood trees, Acacia melanoxylon, but will also nest in myrtle, paperbark, tea tree, and other eucalypt species. They will only nest in forests and not in isolated trees. There are less than 110 breeding pairs in Tasmania. The female is the larger of the pair, standing at 40 to 55 centimetres high, and will hunt for rodents, ringtail possums, rabbits, and small birds. The smaller male eats birds, rodents, and insects. Threats to the grey goshawk include land clearing and fragmentation, lack of old-growth trees in wet forest habitats, deliberate persecution, and accidental death from poisoning or power line electrocution. This last threat is relevant to any individuals living in Myrtle Forest within the relatively close proximity of residential power lines. Another powerful bird of prey is the wedge-tailed eagle, Aquila audax. Its preferred habitat comprises of a mix of forest, farmland, grassland, wetlands, and rivers. Eagles will hunt in each of these habitats, feeding from rabbits, wallabies, possums, and carrion. The wedge-tailed eagle can live to at least 20 years of age. Similar to the grey goshawk, females are larger, with a wingspan of up to 2 metres and weighing between 3.5 to 5.5 kilos. The species nests in old-growth trees in wet forest, but also in dry, sclerophyll forest, away from human disturbances. Wedge-tailed eagles are particularly sensitive to any disturbances while breeding and rearing small chicks. For this reason, a primary threat is disturbance of any kind during the breeding season, which is from August to January. Other threats include habitat loss, felling of trees containing recently used nests, persecution, and other human-related incidents. The creek is a key component of the Myrtle Forest area as it supports the rainforest flora and fauna and provides a clean water supply for residents of Fairy Glen and Collinsvale. The predicted increase in extreme weather events due to climate change, such as drought and flood, will impact water levels in Myrtle Forest Creek. A combination of predicted warmer overall temperatures and low rainfall will mean that species with a low tolerance for water availability will be under threat. Low levels of hydration and high winds from storms can cause large trees to drop limbs or fall completely, creating a disturbance in the forest canopy and erosion and siltation when they are close to the creek. High rainfall can also have a disruptive impact in the ecosystem. In the event of extreme rainfall, the creek is vulnerable to degradation, as the surrounding overlaying soil types are clay loam and yellow-brown soil on solifluction deposits, which are susceptible to erosion, especially on slopes greater than 20 degrees. These types of events would most likely result in extinction cascades with habitat degradation and the loss of key ecosystem components and keystone species. Myrtle Forest's relatively intact condition creates valuable habitat for a great biodiversity of species. Two very serious plant pathogens, Shallara australis, myrtle wilt, and Phytophthora cinnamomi, root rot, could potentially threaten this key value. The Sustainability Indicators for Tasmanian Forests report, published by the State of the Environment Tasmania, identified Shallara australis as the most significant threat to Nothofagus cunninghamii, myrtle trees. The report identifies Phytophthora cinnamomi as the most significant threat to the conservation of native plant species in Tasmania. Phytophthora cinnamomi, root rot, prefers to attack in areas below 700 metres elevation, with at least 600 millimetres of rainfall per year, with a soil temperature above 12 degrees Celsius. It is commonly and quickly spread via contaminated soil on machinery, clothing and footwear, and it can also spread more slowly via the root-to-root contact of an infected plant. While soil temperatures in myrtle forest may have previously been too cool for Phytophthora to establish, changes in the forest due to climate change, such as reduced canopy, moisture and increased sunlight, increase the threat of the disease in the area. Shallara australis, myrtle wilt, is an air and waterborne fungus. Most commonly it infects Nothofagus cunninghamii, myrtle, through entering wounds made by natural disturbances such as storms or human disturbances such as road construction, logging operations and forest thinning. The disease can also be spread via root-to-root contact, which creates patches of dead trees in a forest, a disturbance which creates fragmentation and changes in biotic and abiotic conditions. For example, an opening in the canopy allows increased sunlight to dry out a patch, which reduces the forest's resilience to fire. Increased temperatures and drought conditions due to climate change further exaggerate the presence and impact of these diseases. Fragmentation caused by climate change in the landscape would also enable other invasive species to more easily compete with native species for habitat. For example, weeds that are present on the edge of myrtle forest include Alicia's tears, blackberry, and a variety of thistles. The matrix includes gorse, though none is yet present in the area. Management of the natural values in myrtle forest may require sampling to assess current states and predict future events. Sampling may be conducted for water quality assessments, vegetation assessments, and to monitor changes in climate and distribution of flora and fauna. Sampling methods for water quality could include grab samples taken at regular intervals, which could later be tested for pollutants. The condition of the water, such as colour and clarity, could be recorded at the same time as taking the sample. To make a vegetation assessment, sampling methods could include vegetation quadrats and line transects. Tree height could be measured using a clinometer, which could inform an estimation of the tree's age. For long-term monitoring, permanent photo points could be useful to estimate regeneration, revegetation, erosion impacts, recreational or human impacts, and weed growth. Additionally, point counts could add quantitative data to the assessment. Bird surveys could be conducted periodically to monitor the wedge-tailed eagle and grey goshawk populations, as well as other bird species. Challenges for sampling in myrtle forest are associated with the steepness of slopes and relatively high density of vegetation. Vegetation density means that photo point assessments would be most useful in areas with a panorama or more open section of forest. Steep slopes and thick vegetation can make vegetation quadrats and line transects difficult to put into practice. In addition to sampling, many of the natural values in myrtle forest are well documented in online databases and in various publications. To understand human impact in myrtle forest, it is necessary to first look at the matrix surrounding the area. Myrtle forest is a relatively intact area with minimal fragmentation. As myrtle forest is part of the northernmost edge of Wellington Park, the surrounding matrix to the west, south and east comprises of reserved native forest and alpine vegetation, and myrtle forest can be considered part of this continuous habitat. The northern section of the matrix comprises of rural human habitation with roads, houses, introduced species of plants and some livestock. Small patches of native vegetation are dispersed throughout this section of the matrix, which creates a gradual decrease of native habitat, and therefore the edge of myrtle forest could be described as a soft edge. Soft edges allow for greater species movement between patches of vegetation. This can be positive for the survival of some species, but the combination of human habitation and native vegetation can present challenges for others, such as the high incidence of roadkill on the road leading to myrtle forest, especially the road leading to Collinsvale. The northern edge of myrtle forest is where the greatest amount of habitat fragmentation occurs. A small area was previously used for selective logging, and the impact of this activity can still be seen, with a few stumps and an open canopy. To remove the logged trees, a road was constructed, which now leads to a cleared day use area, and these two human disturbances create a small section of fragmentation. The traditional owners of Myrtle Forest were the Millikirdy people, who were the original custodians of southeast Tasmania. Although there are no known sites of significance to the Tasmanian Aboriginal community within Myrtle Forest, there are important cultural sites nearby in Lenna Valley, Newtown Rivulet, and in other areas of Wellington Park. The Tasmanian Aboriginal community are among the many other stakeholders with interests in the area, including neighbours, recreational bushwalkers, water users, nature conservationists, and tourists. Myrtle Forest is managed by the Wellington Park Management Trust, in compliance with the objectives of the Wellington Park Management Plan, which classes the northern section of the Myrtle Forest as a recreation zone. The Trust coordinates its on-ground management through the Glenorchy and Hobart City Councils, Hobart Water, and the Parks and Wildlife Service. Additionally, the Collinsvale Coordinating and Precinct Committee are involved in undertaking work and improvements to the picnic shelter within the Myrtle Forest area. In 2004, all management groups decided to prepare a site development plan for the recreation area in Myrtle Forest. Challenges for management were identified, which included the issues of vandalism and other antisocial behaviour such as hooning in the gravel car park, dumping of burnt cars and rubbish, illegal cutting and removing of man-ferns, and poor visitor experience due to lack of facilities such as a toilet. A number of recommended strategies were implemented, such as sealing the gravel road, installing a locked gate and creating a car park, building a small viewing deck at the waterfall, and the installation of a toilet. Current challenges for management in Myrtle Forest are associated with the rise of visitors to the area. The 2004 management plan hasn't been revised, and a number of new management issues are arising in the area, such as the size of the car park, which is often overflowing with cars, the pressure of increased use of the walking track, the increased likelihood of pollution from rubbish and excrements, and the introduction of Phytophthora spread via human activity. Making the best use of the thinly stretched resources of the Parks and Wildlife Service and the Hobart and Glenorchy City Councils is a key management challenge. By managing the area appropriately, Myrtle Forest will have enhanced resilience and improved adaptive capability towards the threatening processes resulting from climate change. Relatively little is known about many of the natural values in Myrtle Forest and other areas of Wellington Park, and there are many opportunities for further research. With appropriate management, Myrtle Forest will be enjoyed for its natural values for many years to come.